place with late night television. Nobody gives a fuck about it anymore.
I know.
And it's slowly, you have a bad business model and you're not adapting.
Yeah. Yeah, the creativity's gone for late night comedy, right? Like, that's not really a thing anymore.
Last night was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Several people shared in this achievement. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times he's second only to Justin Trudeau.
Just when Jimmy Kimmel thought he was the king of late night snark, Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly crashed the party like uninvited truth grenades and left no laugh track to save him. Rogan shredded the comedy cliches. Megyn exposed the smugness like it was a federal case. And Jimmy, he went from punchlines to punching air. What did they say that turned Mr. Monologue into Mr. Mayhem? Oh, it's messier than a writer's room in Meltdown. This roast isn't just late night, it's last rites.
Kimmel?
Yeah.
No, it's him, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
good. That's a good one.
He's a comic.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, he used to host The Man Show. I mean, he's done some pretty outrageous shit back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, for hee-hees and haw-haws.
No, that's a good joke on top of a good joke.
Yeah, it's a good joke. Funny thing to say. He's had a real problem with Elon from the beginning of this thing, but it's like he's in this leftist thought bubble. He is in the most leftist thought bubble available, which is Hollywood. And, you know, and I think also, you know, he famously, there's some videos of him in blackface, and those came out, and he had apologized for them, and I think he took that hit and, like, really doubled down the other direction.
Jimmy Kimmel once declared himself America's late night conscience. And just like that, every therapist in the country filed a malpractice lawsuit against themselves. Because if that guy is the nation's moral compass, then we're all wandering through a minefield with a magnet shoved up our noses. Let's talk about the human embodiment of a reply guy with a studio budget, Jimmy Kimmel. This is a man whose primary comedic evolution has been from guy who asked women to bounce on trampolines to guy who now lectures everyone like he's trying to win a Peabody. His entire brand rests somewhere between moral superiority and frat boy nostalgia. Imagine if a TED Talk and a beer bong had a baby, and that baby wouldn't stop crying every time someone disagreed with it. That's Jimmy.
Fondness for the practice. Yes, some of the very same celebrities who wanted you to believe they were horrified after yours truly said in 2018 that people used to don dark makeup in order to imitate well-known black celebrities and it wasn't a big deal. Absolutely ate up the performance by Hollywood darling Mr. Kimmel, whose blackface costumes included his oft-repeated bit as basketball star Karl Malone.
Now, Karl Malone never seen no flying saucer himself, but if he do, that's gonna be a spooky time.
Now, Jimmy's latest achievement, getting obliterated by a UFC commentator and a woman who used to professionally take on war zones like they were light jogs, Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly. And no, it wasn't a debate, no table, no chairs, no moderator, just two people casually decimating the last remaining shred of relevance that clings to Jimmy's name like the sidekick in a buddy cop film.
Back in the day when I was on the primetime of Fox and you were on the primetime of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Piers. I mean, occasionally they understood that they were in the game of making everyone laugh. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Colbert, Kimmel, Seth Meyers, who I struggle to even mention that guy's name. He's such an absolute prick. I can't stand him. But anyway, it's just my thought bubble out loud.
And let's be honest, Megyn Kelly doesn't exactly hand out compliments like Halloween candy. She's more of a, here's a mirror, take a good look kind of person. And she aimed that mirror right at Kimmel's career. And what was staring back wasn't funny, it was tragic. The man went from interviewing actual Hollywood legends to fuming in a monologue because someone didn't clap hard enough for his opinion on Twitter. His idea of taking risks now involves using a slightly different tone to repeat the same Trump punchline he's been microwaving since 2016.
You all know what they saw. They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it because they accurately deduce that he could still be the Democratic nominee and they don't want to ding him up maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer saw or says? But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel happens to be employed by ABC, which happens to have a rather large news organization. And he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics. Where are you, Jimmy? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but you won't.
Meanwhile, Joe Rogan, a guy whose brand is literally, let's sit down and talk nonsense for 3 hours with an ex-CIA operative and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach, just flicked Jimmy aside like a dandruff flake. Because that's how weightless Jimmy has become in the realm of cultural significance. Rogan could spend 2 hours discussing elk meat and ayahuasca, and it would still carry more journalistic integrity than Kimmel's latest impromptu meltdown disguised as a comedy bit. The downfall of Jimmy Kimmel isn't a slow decline, it's a theatrical plunge with pyrotechnics and a chorus line. His late night show has become less The Tonight Show and more the Why Is This Still On show. His monologues now function as political sermons, and they're about as fun as a PowerPoint on tax reform read by a guy with a sinus infection. And let's talk about that comedy style. You know how some people say sarcasm is the lowest form of wit? Jimmy somehow went even lower. It's not even sarcasm anymore, it's bitterness dressed in dad jeans. His punchlines feel like they were written by a group chat full of wine moms with expired Twitter blue checks.
That sort of self-censorship and the idea of being a more empathetic person is a good thing, right? But as long as it's reasonable. But the thing is, the problem with that kind of stuff is it continues to go in the same direction where more and more things become forbidden and toxic, to the point where, you know, the Elon Musk joking around about my pronouns are prosecute Fauci. Jimmy Kimmel made a tweet back to him. He said, your pronouns are ass and hole, which is pretty funny. But then...
Did he really?
Yes. And so then I read that, and there was people saying, please don't joke about pronouns.
Joe Rogan, a guy who willingly lets flat earthers and cryogenicists into his podcast den, still manages to wield more logic and reason than Kimmel in a 15-minute segment. That's how badly Jimmy has lost the plot. He can't even outsense the guy who once spent an entire episode talking about eating squirrels in the desert. And Megyn, she didn't even flinch. She carved Kimmel up like a Thanksgiving turkey with a grudge. While Jimmy was busy basking in his own virtue-signaling glow, Megyn reminded everyone that the smugness is so thick you could frost a cake with it. He thinks he's sharp, but he's just loud. He thinks he's brave, but he's just insulated by applause signs and studio makeup. Let's not forget Jimmy's noble crusade to become the white knight of American morality. Yes, this is the same guy who spent the early 2000s dunking women in bikinis for ratings, but now, suddenly, he's the patron saint of wokeness, rattling off whatever safe, pre-approved opinion his audience already agrees with. It's like watching someone get brave enough to yell at a mirror, then run away when the reflection yells back. You know how every group has that one guy who just discovered politics and now won't shut up at dinner? Jimmy made an entire show out of being that guy, only with worse timing and fewer interesting points. Every time someone disagrees with him, it's not a difference of opinion, it's a national emergency. He's like a fire alarm that goes off whenever someone tweets a meme he doesn't understand.
Jimmy Kimmel was very upset that Donald Trump took a shot at Taylor Swift. Trump was making fun of the fact that she got booed openly at the Super Bowl and he got cheered to the high heavens. And Jimmy Kimmel didn't much like that and had the following to say.
Trump was at the game. He got a big thrill because some of the crowd booed Taylor Swift when they put her up on the Jumbotron, which of course made Harry Conman Sr. very happy. He posted 3 times about this. After the game, he wrote, the only one that had a tougher night than the Chiefs was Taylor Swift. She got booed out of the stadium. MAGA is very unforgiving. Well, she didn't get booed out of the stadium. Unlike you, she stayed for the whole game.
And the jokes. Let's just say you could find more original humor in a junior high talent show. At least those kids are trying. Jimmy's punchlines feel like they've been generated by feeding 2017's trending hashtags into a calculator. It's not that he stopped being funny, it's that he now believes being right is a substitute for being funny. Newsflash, it's not. Comedy doesn't age well when it's preserved in moral formaldehyde. Even Joe Rogan, who gets a bad rap for talking too long about weird supplements, at least understands that listening is part of the job. Jimmy doesn't listen, he delivers, from a teleprompter, with the energy of a man who's just discovered that passion can be copy-pasted. His entire shtick now is rooted in clapping for the same tired world view. It's a performance of activism, and Joe and Megyn just shredded that stage curtain like it was tissue paper in a rainstorm, because at the end of the day, no amount of makeup or network polish can cover up the desperation of a man who needs the world to know he's a good person. You know what good people do? They act quietly. Jimmy, on the other hand, needs a laugh track and an applause sign to validate his charity selfie.
And it was the Eagles fans who were booing her. But you're right, it's all about you. It's always all. Trump's just jealous of Taylor Swift because she has more followers and more money and no kids than he does.
Okay. But by the way, I was there all the way through, and she was gone. Like, she was missing in action for most of the second half. So I don't know what he's talking about. Trump left at his previously designated time, which was, I think, 8:02. That had been scheduled, and that is when he left. And it's a little harder, Jimmy, when you're the president of the United States, because if you leave when everybody else is leaving, you completely F them over because no one can move anywhere. It's total gridlock in the city. Hello?
You ever notice how Kimmel can't go 5 minutes without dragging Trump into a joke? It's almost poetic, like a man stuck in an eternal Groundhog Day of his own creation. Meanwhile, the rest of the world has moved on to bigger train wrecks, but Jimmy's still trying to make fetch happen, with the same joke he's been force-feeding the audience since the last presidential election. Even his show's format feels like a museum piece at this point. Monologue, celebrity plug, pre-recorded sketch, exit. It's the late-night version of reheated cafeteria food, technically sustenance, but you wouldn't call it satisfying. Jimmy's become so predictable, you could replace him with a cardboard cutout and a soundboard, and no one would notice. Except the cue card guy, who might finally get a break. Joe Rogan, sitting in a bunker with a dozen conspiracy theorists, somehow generates more real, organic discussion than Jimmy in a $10 million studio with 5 writers and a live band. That's not a joke, that's a eulogy for the last shred of authenticity in Kimmel's monologue. Megyn Kelly, who has spent her career bulldozing through both sides of the aisle like a polite hurricane, didn't even have to try. Jimmy's contradictions expose themselves. Here's a man who wants to be edgy and beloved by the exact people who cancel edgy. That's like trying to win a mosh pit dance-off in a tuxedo. He's caught between two identities, the dude bro who once co-hosted The Man Show and the lecture hall professor who desperately wants to trend on MSNBC Twitter.
You know how much it costs to produce Jimmy Kimmel's show? I guarantee you it's tens and tens of millions. It could be as much as 100 million. I have no idea. You know how much Tucker's video cost? Nothing. You know how much Jimmy Kimmel, how many people he gets tuning in on an average night? Just last week, his average was, in the overall, meaning all viewers, 1.5 million. In the key demo, 236,000. Tucker would have been embarrassed to pull that on any night he was on the Fox News channel. That's what they're getting now. Tucker's numbers were 3 times what Jimmy Kimmel gets. And Tucker's little basement video that he did from clearly like his cabin that he broadcasts out of Maine in literally has 21 million views. Okay, 21 million views. Whereas, as I point out, on ABC, a massive network that comes into your home for free, that you have to make no effort to find, at best, Jimmy Kimmel can get 1.5 million. He needs to have a little self-perspective before going out there and hurling these insults because he looks a little silly.
And what's truly tragic is that there was a time when Jimmy had the chance to be something different, something bold. He had a platform, but instead of using it to elevate voices, he used it to amplify himself, because when Jimmy talks, it's not about the topic, it's about him. It's always been about him. Even his activism is just another spotlight. Joe and Megyn, for all their flaws, can at least hold a conversation without needing a laugh track to survive. They talk to people, not at them. Meanwhile, Jimmy's dialogue style is like watching a YouTube ad for vitamins yell at you about climate change. There's something inherently comedic about a man who uses a monologue to pretend he's having a dialogue. That's not a conversation, that's a hostage video with better lighting. The most interaction Jimmy has with the real world is through the lens of celebrity PR teams and Twitter comments from fans who still think Yas is a valid political argument. Joe and Megyn tearing him to shreds wasn't just satisfying, it was necessary, like lancing a boil made of smugness and recycled SNL-level jokes. They didn't even need to get personal, the facts were enough. The fact that Kimmel's moral outrage is basically monetized narcissism. The fact that his comedy is more dated than a fax machine with feelings. The fact that people still watch his show mainly by accident, like falling asleep with the TV on and waking up confused but vaguely irritated.
Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored at the Kennedy Center? You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal. Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's fine. If you are of the right and happen to just say, hey, people used to wear blackface and nobody freaked out about it, you get fired.
So where does Jimmy go from here? Probably back to the writer's room, where a team of overworked assistants tries to reverse engineer what counts as brave in Hollywood this week. He'll come back with a smug smile, a stitched together monologue, and a joke about Trump's hair. Again, like clockwork, but he'll do it with a little more hesitation, because Joe and Megyn reminded everyone that the Emperor's new clothes are mostly just studio lighting and virtue-scented cologne. Behind all that performative righteousness is a guy who peaked during a bit where he fed children vegetables and called it groundbreaking. What's truly poetic is how Jimmy's entire empire is built on the illusion of relevance. He's like a hologram projected by a broken machine, visibly there, audibly loud, but utterly untouchable in terms of substance. Every show feels like he's reading from a progressive Pinterest board, pretending it's groundbreaking commentary, but scratch the surface, and it's just recycled tweets with studio lighting. And while he peddles his morality as comedy, his punchlines land with the grace of a bowling ball in a glassware store. Loud, clumsy, and deeply unnecessary. What makes the recent takedown sting more is the fact that Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly didn't even break a sweat. They dismantled Jimmy's carefully curated public persona with the ease of someone pulling a thread from a cheap Halloween costume. They didn't need scripts, studio applause, or camera cuts, just common sense and a willingness to call out Hollywood hypocrisy without blinking. The contrast was surgical. Kimmel postures, they deliver. He performs, they reveal. And let's not ignore the irony. Jimmy made a name-mocking reality TV stars, yet has slowly morphed into a reality TV version of a talk show host. Scripted, overproduced, and hollow. He doesn't challenge the system, he is the system. A willing cog in the Hollywood echo chamber, congratulating himself for taking a risk every time he parrots the latest safe opinion dressed up as rebellion. It's not comedy when you're scared of pushback. It's not edgy when you're catering to an audience already in full agreement. And it's certainly not brave when you punch in the same direction every single night. That's not a comic. That's a weather vane pointing wherever the social media winds blow. In the end, Jimmy Kimmel isn't dangerous. He's just tired and terrified that no one's laughing anymore. Not because they don't get it, but because they do. Because the punchlines are predictable, the outrage is rehearsed, and the applause has turned into polite silence. And maybe, just maybe, that's the funniest part of all.